Historically, the American presidency and the physical church have been deeply intertwined. For generations, commanders-in-chief demonstrated their personal faith to the electorate by showing up to Sunday service. Presidents like Jimmy Carter set a high benchmark for what political scientists call liturgical frequency. Regular, documented participation in organized worship was the standard metric of a president's religious alignment. In the early 21st century, that relationship fractured. The physical act of sitting in a pew was completely decoupled from the political act of religious expression. The administrations of Donald Trump, specifically his first term and his return to office in 2025, provide a precise, mathematically measurable case study in how executive communication evolved. A rigorous review of the data reveals a stark divergence. The administration combined record-low physical church attendance with a record-high, strategically dense barrage of religious rhetoric. This divergence illustrates a structural change in American politics. Modern executive authority no longer requires the physical mediation of a church building to consolidate a highly devout voting base. To measure this shift, we look at the historical baseline. Across 448 major public addresses from Franklin D. Roosevelt through the Obama administration, the average president used religious terminology at a rate of 3.5 terms per thousand words. This chart tracks religious terms per thousand words. During his first term, Trump doubled the historical average, hitting 7.3. Explicit God terms followed a steeper curve, reaching 1.4 per thousand words, nearly triple the historical average. The strategy followed a deliberate timeline. During early primaries, mentions were low. To secure key conservative religious voters, the frequency of these terms tripled. By the time he took office, the administration was heavily utilizing a defined 111-word dictionary of specifically Christian terminology to frame major policy initiatives. The statistical peak occurred following the 2017 Las Vegas mass shooting. The president's national address contained 52 religious terms per thousand words, 5 times higher than comparable disaster responses like the Challenger explosion or Hurricane Katrina. During peacetime operations, this dense application of religious language served as the administration's primary tool for domestic meaning-making and crisis management. Yet this linguistic focus stood in absolute contrast to his physical engagement with organized worship, which was largely confined to locations like the Episcopal Church of Bethesda by the Sea in Florida. Across his entire 4-year term, the president attended church services exactly 14 documented times. These limited appearances were heavily indexed to mandatory ceremonial events, such as the 2017 inauguration, or major holidays like Easter and Christmas that provided specific photo opportunities. The lack of physical attendance had no negative impact on his primary demographic. Polling from the era shows the president maintained a 77% favorability rating among white evangelical Protestants who attend church weekly. The data confirms that this voting base willingly prioritized the executive's policy alignment and rhetorical signaling over any expectation of personal liturgical habits. By late February 2026, the administration's rhetorical machinery had to adapt to a severe geopolitical reality. The United States initiated its largest Middle Eastern military buildup in decades, launching direct strikes against the Islamic Republic of Iran. In the weeks leading up to the invasion, the White House laid specific domestic groundwork. They established a federal task force with the goal of eliminating anti-Christian bias within federal agencies. Led by Attorney General Pamela Bondi, this task force institutionalized religious protection, firmly positioning the executive branch as the ultimate domestic defender of the Christian faith. The 2026 National Prayer Breakfast served as a crucial rehearsal for the coming conflict. The president announced a plan to rededicate America as one nation under God, shifting his rhetoric toward themes of national survival and divine providence. When major combat operations were formally announced on February 28th, this language was fully operationalized. In an 8-minute address, the president invoked the protection of God 3 times, asking the nation to pray for the military as they executed a noble mission. Preloading this religious goodwill domestically was a calculated tactical maneuver. It provided immediate moral scaffolding and ideological justification for a high-casualty military offensive. As the war entered Week 6, the human cost began to severely test that moral scaffolding. the White House faced a severe narrative crisis triggered by mounting combat casualties and a strike that killed over 160 children in Manab, Iran. Domestic support faced compounded pressure points. The military reported 13 service members killed and 300 wounded, while the closure of the Strait of Hormuz drove global gas prices to crippling record highs. The administration responded with a strategy of rhetorical sanctification. Speeches quickly pivoted to honor the fallen as martyrs who died to prevent a nuclear Iran, deflecting criticism regarding the mounting human toll. This graph maps the strategy. As casualties rise on the left axis, religious signifiers spike on the right, culminating in an April rescue branded an Easter miracle. Notice the data point for April 5th, Easter Sunday. Physical church attendance registers at absolute zero. While millions attended Easter services, the president bypassed physical liturgy entirely. He remained at the White House, issuing a series of digital threats targeting Iranian infrastructure, concluding one post with the mocking phrase, "Praise be to Allah." The Easter miracle messaging successfully fused modern, high-tech combat operations with ancient religious symbolism. It sanitized the realities of the conflict entirely through a tightly controlled digital narrative. Between 2017 and 2026, the administration's communication model transitioned from general domestic populism to a highly digitized wartime messianic framework. Throughout this escalation, the data holds steady. The voters' personal frequency of prayer and church attendance correlates directly with their support for the war effort, operating entirely independently of the executive's own lack of piety. What the data ultimately reveals is a functional theology. Religious language is deployed based purely on its linguistic utility and its capacity to achieve specific political and military objectives. By entirely bypassing physical church bodies and speaking directly to devout demographics via social media, the administration permanently decentralized traditional religious structures, placing the executive firmly at the center of the spiritual narrative. In replacing the physical pew with the digital broadcast, the executive established a faith-based nationalism. It functions as an impenetrable shield against domestic political dissent, engineered to withstand the pressures of global crisis.